This continues an interview with Mr. Johnny Skinner on October 27th, 1995 at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey with Kurt Piehler and Steve Gillen. You saw a lot of crashes, and you saw people you knew not come back, and it seems you were able to cope better with it than some people.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I mean, some people are really, to this day, are still really
Are they?
torn up about
Well, I
it.
guess they would be. Each individual,
Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, it bothered me. I've no question about it.
Yeah,
you feel it, but
But it seems like you had
it's part of life. It was part of life as it existed in those days, and you had to accept it. Or we had one of the missions I was flying at, early mission, we had a bombardier and a navigator. And the navigator was a very high-strung individual, very late. Let's see, he was a real gentleman, we'll put it that way, of the old school. In fact, I think he was an instructor pre-war at Brown University. And we were going over to target, and as you know, the bombardier leans over his bomb sight, and the flak was medium, and all of a sudden the bombardier fell over. It was a hole like that right in the middle of his forehead. He was killed. And it hit the navigator, and he just, well, he used a slang phrase, went off his rocker, and you had to restrain him. And he just, I guess he was just, because he hadn't flown a few missions, and I guess that he just reached a point where he just couldn't take anymore. Now, other people, they would be concerned about something like that, but they'd adjust. So each one has to treat it in their own manner. I can't.
I mean, you mentioned this case of this navigator who just couldn't in battle. Were there any other cases of shell shock of people who couldn't fly again or didn't want to?
But they weren't as violent as he was. I mean, he was really raving and everything. Usually they get the shakes.
So it was more of they just really...
Yeah, they get the shakes and they couldn't function. But they weren't as loud or raving or demonstrative as they just, and they sort of withdraw in themselves, and you could see their hands would be trembling, and then of course they'd get grounded because it's no good. I mean, I know I never looked down on them. I mean, a lot of guys are saying that's a lot of bullshit. There's no such thing as being shell shocked,
but you knew that
oh yeah, when I think that initial experience with this fellow in a plane, because as I said, it was one of my earlier missions, exposed me to that fact, and you knew it could happen. And otherwise, I might have been as nasty as some of the other guys were.
Did you have anyone who ever deserted?
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
No. I know guys that went over the hill temporarily. I mean, I used to do it. I mean, I'd be out in South Dakota and I'd get a pass for 100 miles, and I'd hitchhike and get a train, and I'd come home. And I'd have to be back Monday morning, and you'd have somebody cover for you. But that's not desertion, of course. You just take a little advantage of the situation.
Well, someone in the Air Force had told me a story that he apparently flew a plane home. He lived in, I think it was in the Dakotas.
Oh yeah, you could. What you do is you'd go to the flight office and you'd bum rides. In fact, I almost was involved in that plane that crashed into the Empire State Building.
Really?
Yeah, I missed the ride. I was coming back, and
you missed that.
Thank God. Thank God. But you'd go there, and they were very good about that. They'd pick you up. You'd probably ride in a hatch or somewhere, or fly a turret position if it was a bomber, or if it was a transport, you'd sit on the floor or something like that. I mean, guys flew all over the country like that. That was a good deal. They did it in Europe too.
Were there any superstitions aboard a plane?
Oh yeah, there was some superstition. Some guys are, what the heck, Jonesy used to have a superstition. What the hell was it? I remember we used to always kid him about it. What the hell was it? He used to get in a turret, and he used to do something with his guns, whether he'd take the block out and everything else and put it back in, but he would never fail to do that. And we asked him why he did it. He said, I don't know. He says, I just don't trust people. But it was like a guy. If you play baseball, when you're walking in from a field, you walk over you never step on a foul line. Or some guys will never walk in from the outfield, like they touch third base or first base, and that was his superstition. And I don't know. I wouldn't call this myself have a superstition. I always blessed myself before I went in the airplane, but I wouldn't call that a superstition.
Did you ever? Would you have liked to have gone into aviation after the war, or was that just not in the cards?
Well, what happened is after the war, my life became concentrated. I mean, I got out in October. I started college in November, and didn't have any money. I mean, we weren't paid until I don't think I got paid until the following March. You know, the GI Bill, and in fact, we had to go up to Lyons. They had all our records up to Lyons Veterans Hospital, and I walked in there. My buddy and I said it was in the Marines. We drove up there, and we'd go in there and tell them what we want. And the guys are looking. They had the records in a waste paper basket. They were all a hell over. They were all so screwed up. But no, I can't say I was going to aviation. I went to, as I said, I got tied up in college, and then I graduated 1 week and got married the next. And then kids came along. Who the hell had? Then I got associated with my company and didn't go into it. You had gone through
Catholic school all your life, yeah. At Rutgers, although after World War II, it was more of a state university, but it
wasn't a state university.
Yeah, it was Dutch. It was more of a Dutch Reform college. Yeah. Had you thought of going elsewhere to college?
Well, I did. Another friend of mine went out to Notre Dame, and I was thinking about going out there with him. But the transition between discharge and starting school was rapid, and I was tired of being away from home, so I decided to stay home. And I lived. You know, I was acquainted with Rutgers. I grew up here, and I just didn't want to travel. Didn't want to go away from home again. Maybe if I had a bigger length of time, a larger length of time between, I might have. I don't know. But that was my reason I didn't want to go very well.
Were you glad you came to Rutgers after?
Oh, yeah. I enjoyed Rutgers. Got a lot of fun at Rutgers. I enjoyed it. I'm never sorry I went to it.
You mentioned that you played sports and you were very active.
Yeah. Wasn't very good, but I'm active. I played a lot of sports, and mostly baseball, and I played a lot of tennis.
And one of the things that struck me, and I ask, it's a standard people from class of '49, is, I mean, on the one hand, you have veterans. I mean, really, in some cases, very bad. I mean, in your case, battle-hardened veteran. I mean, you flew in a number of missions, and then you have 18-year-old and 19-year-old kids who. How did that interaction go between?
Well, mostly, you know, you get along. I mean, because most of the guys would be with like goes to like, and in those days, as I said, we were only 60 guys that started, and my being living 2 blocks from the Rutgers gym, you're home, but it didn't bother us, or I don't know whether it bothered the kids or not, but there's only one time that we had any interaction was when we were going down at what's that hall down there, the corner of Somerset and College Avenue. They just redid it.
Wynitz?
Wynitz
Hall?
Yeah. Well, in those days, they had they had these coat hooks to hang. I mean, it was all real old-fashioned building. And we were going into class one day, and this kid popped, an ASTP, popped up and said, "Look at the 4Fs." And the war was over then. He came out with 4Fs. I don't know whether he was drunk or he was white. I don't know why he did it. But this one fellow I was with, he was a big fellow, and he was a ranger. He went into Normandy, and he had a metal plate in his head, and he didn't like anyone calling him a 4F, and he went over, and I thought he was going to kill a guy. What he did, he picked up the young man, and you know the web belts that you wear? He hung them on a coat hook. And turned went like this, walked away. I thought he was going to attack him, but he didn't. I guess he caught himself, but he was a tough cook. He went through a hell of a lot. I mean, as I said, he was a ranger. He went up that, was it Cape de Hoc or whatever it was, to climb that mountain. And he climbed and he had Normandy. Oh yeah, and he got hit. He had a metal plate in his head. We told him we put any magnets down in the lab by him. He'd screw it up, but. That was the only thing that I've ever had any interaction. Not me personally, but he did, huh?
where there was some tension between the
Yeah,
two.
yeah, and that was, as I said, these weren't the local kids, the civilians. These were guys who were in ASTP, and they were in uniform. They were part of the Army.
Did you ever have any tensions between, you being from New Brunswick and, I mean, at the time, I don't really know particularly, the whole makeup of the school, but...
You mean guys that were from other than New Brunswick?
Yeah, like people that were maybe more well off and this and that at the time. Was there any
Tension?
not tension? Well, maybe.
No, not really tension. There's certain fraternities that we used to say were a pain in the ass, but that's about all. We, as I said, you got to remember that the guys that I went to school with were advanced. I mean, they weren't like kids coming out of school, and if you're part of the expression, like you. I mean, we had gone through various experiences which matured us a lot faster than we normally would have been, and we probably had a different outlook in life. And this guy, say for example, I hit Normandy. What would the fraternity wouldn't worry him after all he went through, for Christ's sake. I was just it was you might say they're a pain in the ass or something like that, but no active tensions as far as conflict or fisticuffs.
Well, one of the things people have related to me is one thing that went out the window was class hazings, which had been very common.
Oh yeah, they tried it. Because we were the first class after the war, and they had the freshman dinkies in those days. That was stopped real quick. Had enough of that crap. Because we got hazed in the Air Force.
You were hazed in the Air Force.
Oh yeah, well, we went to basics training, and then we went up to I tell you what, the Hiram College. They had an awful lot of hazing, and the upperclassmen, and they hazed the hell out of the incoming class.
And what was the attitude of the commanders in terms of hazing?
Well, as long as it was in line and didn't become over violent. It was mostly chicken shit hazing, recite this or brace, eat a square meal like they do at West Point, and
so it wasn't a violent kind where you would
no.
He
would put up with that, and the guys weren't that. I mean, some of them were real pain in the ass, but most of the guys are pretty regular guys, and they did it. And they laughed, and then after your certain period of time, you're through the hazing week, and you'd go out and have a beer with them and so on. But it wasn't violent.
The other thing that people have mentioned was that chapel, the mandatory chapel, because there were just so many of you. Did you ever go to the official chapel?
Sure, you went there. Didn't bother you. Something you had to do. We all took Professor McKinney's music class because we all could sleep in the back of the classroom, and he'd pass you anyway. So he was a good guy, Prof. He was an institution around here in those days. I guess he was there. I don't know how many years. I guess he went up 40 years or something. And, but we all used to take that, and he used to see the guys, and he turned the volume up on the guys. But we would. It was all right.
You listed Professor George as one of your favorite professors, and he's been one of the most popular people.
Oh, Prof. George. Oh, he was a unique man. He was a unique man. His classes were always very entertaining, but it was educational too. I mean, he knew how to put a point across, and he did it in a way that the guys accepted it. Mm-hmm. Because let's face it, now we had another guy that was teaching down here, and he was an ex-GI. He just got out of service too, and he started about the same time as we did. We'd cut class. We'd go down to CT Tavern for a beer, and who the hell be sitting on there? He'd cut class too. We all have beer together. It was just one of those things, but you have different. I had a little Japanese professor. I can't think of his right name, and we used to. He was a doctor. I can't. But anyway, we used to tease him, and because he was very hard to understand. But he was a good guy, and he'd be very patient with us because we're probably a bunch of wise guys anyway. But he was very patient with us.
You mentioned that there was more give and take with the professors. I mean,
yeah.
When you had gone through high school, I mean, partly because they would wrap your knuckle. it sounded like you would be very deferential to your teacher.
You were deferential and respectful, but you were very close to him.
Yeah.
If that sounds like a contradiction, it isn't, because anytime you had any trouble or any problems or anything, you could always go to the sister and maybe sit there and listen to you. And as I said, I'll give you an experience. One of my friends I went to high school with he became a priest, and we had this principal, Sister Benita, and she was a well known throughout the Trenton Diocese, which was at that time Trenton Diocese, and everyone knew her. Everyone deferred to her. I mean, she was a big muff, even the bishop. And she was going to some kind of a occasion, I don't know what it is. And Carney was working, that's the guy that graduated from school with me, was working as an aide to the bishop. So she gets out of the car. They had a chauffeur. They chauffeured up. She was getting well on in years, but they used to defer to her anyway. She gets up, and the bishop goes over to shake it, and she walks. Hey, Carney, now you behave, and just like walk right by the. I mean, that's how close she was, and she'd do anything for the students. But the poor bishop's standing there with egg on his face, and she walks by him.
But it sounds like after the military, you were much. I wouldn't say you weren't respectful to your professors, but you were much.
Oh, we were respectful.
But there was a much more give and take.
Yeah.
You were much more.
Sure.
You were less intimidated by them, I think.
Oh yeah.
It might be the
sure.
way.
Yeah. Well, don't forget we were more mature than an average college student in those days, and a lot of our teachers, or professors, or instructors, whatever you want to call them, were our contemporaries. I mean, they were ex-GIs too. This guy, as I said, he used to cut class. He was a machine gunner in the infantry. I think he was a corporal and manned a machine gun over in France. And this guy, we had some of the instructors who we used to give they were a pain in the ass. I mean, you had that run into all different types of people. We had one particular instructor. He was he was Marine drill sergeant, and he was chicken. I mean, we had these big classes, and they're, lecture hall, and they'd be up there lecturing. He'd turn around, write something on the board. One guy yells out, "Give me liberty and give me death!" The old saw. Who said that? Patrick Henry, you dope. Things like that. We do antagonize guys like that, but guys like George and everything, that was it. But you'd pick, certain guys. You wouldn't take any crap from them either. I mean, if they give it to you. But most of it, as I said, we never had that problem. That's the only guy I can even think of.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of people were really quite impressed with the Rutgers teachers.
Oh yeah, they were good teachers and down to earth, and we enjoyed class very much.
How crucial was I guess two questions. When did you learn of the GI Bill, and how crucial was it for you coming to college?
It was very crucial. If I didn't have it, I'd probably have to be working and take me 10 years to get through. Very crucial. Of course, you learned about the GI Bill when they first started, when you first came back, because as I said, I got discharged in October and started in November, so I was well aware of it.
Had you thought of why did you pick business as a major, or was there?
I don't know. I originally started out in engineering because I thought I always liked to do things with my hands, and I could do math. And then all of a sudden I was going to be a civil engineer. I don't know. I said, I think I'm making a mistake. And some of my friends were in business, and we were talking. You get talking, and then I said, well, that sounds pretty good. And I took that route, and then I'm glad I did. I would probably a lousy engineer. I mean, so I got into business, and I enjoyed it.
How did you meet your wife? It sounds like you met when you came back to New Brunswick.
Well, she's a New Brunswick girl, too.
Yeah.
She went to the same school, only she was a couple of years behind me. Well, I knew of the family. I didn't know her personally. And as I said, I played a lot of tennis. And we used to play in tournaments up in Bugalo Park. We used to have county tournaments. And my wife was going with my doubles partner. And one of my other friends bet me $5 I wouldn't ask her for a date. And I needed money, so I asked her for a date, and that was it. I mean, we got married. We've been married now. I guess we got married 49, so it's 46 years now. And,
so your 50th anniversary of graduating, 50th anniversary of marriage will be coming up.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The Rutgers, right? That's right. It'll be coming up faster than I like it to, I guess. But no, that's the way as I said, I knew of the family because everyone knew each other in the Sixth Ward. But she was from a hell of a lot wealthier family than I. I mean, her father was a chemist, and he had his own laboratory in New York. In fact, he was the one that. Have you ever heard of the Borden Brown cow, the ice cream covered, the chocolate covered ice cream popsicle? Well, he was the one that perfected that. He, when we first got married, we moved into the family. He had died. He had passed away. He wasn't there when we were married. And I remember going down the cellar. He had a workshop and a lab down the cellar and cleaning out some of the stuff down there. I come across this bottle dated 1920 dish detergent, long before the even. Another thing, he had rubber back rugs. They never had them in those days. He had perfected. He had the ersatz eggs, the fake eggs, and he was a hell of a scientist, but a lousy businessman. That's what my mother-in-law used to say. And she was a bacteriologist too. So they were from a scientific family.
So you really married the.
Oh, they lost all their money in the Depression. So. I told my wife I married her for her money, but I got screwed because they lost it all. No, they lost it. They lost their bundle. They lost quite a bit in the Depression. They lived right up there in Easton Avenue, one of the big houses across from Piehler Park.
How did you get your first job out of college?
My first job out of college, I mean, it was a depression. I mean, recession. If you remember, 49 jobs where I had one job offer to go with Armstrong Cork, but I had just gotten married and it would involve me covering about 28 states or something. I said, to hell with that. So I had a friend of mine that his father had a printing business. So I took a job with him in the interim as office manager. And that was my first job. And then after that, I had another friend that was with the General Motors, and through word of mouth, they were expanding, and I went in and I got the job with them, and I was with them until I retired.
And what positions did you hold for GM?
Oh, anyone that starts at GM starts out as a collector, and that's was part of my war experience or military experience helped me, because at that time, as you know, Korea was, and Camp Kilmer was quite active, and we used to get what we used to call 582s, which were assignments from other parts of the country of GIs that buy a car in California and use it to drive to Kilmer and then take off and would pay, and you'd have to go find it. So it gave me access. I knew how to grease the skids, because they were, one of the other finance companies were stupid. They swiped the car and drove it out of Kilmer without going through the provost sergeant, and then they wouldn't let us in. And so I went over there one day. I started out as a collector, and because of my background, I knew there's always a way to operate. So I asked to speak to the provost sergeant, not the provost officer, and he consented. He's a big provost sergeant. They wield a lot of power, more than the provost himself. And I got talking to him. We got talking, GI talk, back then. Then he says, maybe I'll let you in. You seem like a pretty good guy. I said, yeah. I said, we get along. So we wound up, I used to grease the guy. I used to buy him a bottle of Old Grandad a month. And when you take a car out, you'd have to have someone to drive. And I'd try to hire him as much as possible, so he made extra money. And that's how we got with Camp Kilmer. But your question was, what did you start as? So you start out as a collector, and then you progress up. I was a branch manager at the end of my career over in Long Island.
How did you like working for GM?
It has ups and downs.
Well, it's fine. I just was in Detroit, staying in the hotel across from GM World's headquarters.
Well, in those days, when you were working for the corporation, this was the finance division now, that you spent a lot of time, because it was so busy and things were progressing so fast, you just couldn't get your work done. And you work at night, and you go and ask the old man for a little overtime. What's the matter? Don't you like your job? I mean, there was no such thing as overtime. But now today, of course, anything you work, you get. But there was a lot of camaraderie with the men together. You'd go out, and I remember when I was on a desk, my next step up after collector, I got a call that these people we were looking all over the country for had turned up in Cape May Courthouse. So one of my friends called in. I says, "Come on, George, we're going to go out and look for cars." He said, "Where are we going?" I said, "I'll meet me downstairs." So he meets me downstairs. I said, he says, "Where are we going?" I said, "We're going down to Cape May." He said, "Holy Christ!" And he said, "I wouldn't have answered the phone if I knew you were." So we went down there and we swiped the car out of the side of the house. And as we're driving out the driveway, the lights come on. A guy comes running out with a shotgun, but we didn't stick around. We took off like a big bird. So you develop that type of experience. You develop a relationship that's pretty good with the guys. And we were very close. And all of us were all contemporary, we're all ex-GIs. And had a lot in common.
Did you ever talk about the war much, either in college or you mentioned you had a group of ex-GIs?
Oh, yeah. You talk about it, but you mostly bullshit each other. You don't talk about the nitty-gritty, most of the guys, unless you get a few bruises in you and you get serious and somebody mentioned about somebody getting hit or something, then you talk a little bit, but most of the stuff was the humorous things that happened in the service.
I was going to say, what did you think, being in GM in that period, what did you think about Korea and America's, say, starting involvement?
I used to be really pissed off.
Yeah.
You'd go in and you talk to the guys, especially you talk to the guys that were in the Air Force, pilots or stuff like that, and they sit down and you'd either go to the officers' club or something and drinking with them or something. And it was very frustrating because the Chinese would fly over the border with their MiGs and they'd go after them, and they're supposed to stop at the Yalu River, but sometimes they did, but majority of them did. And that became very frustrating. And what I think about the Korean War, I think the guys in the Korean War got screwed, but good. As far as recognition of what they did, I think they were really screwed. As far as people recognized that was a tough war, and it was tougher in many ways than a lot of World War II was. With that territorial terrain and everything, it was pretty tough. And I think that they should have ended it. The goddamn police action. I think that is a partial cause for what happened in Vietnam. If they had ended that war in Korea, really ended it, I don't think we might not have had Vietnam, because I don't know if you're in history, you probably read more about it than I did, but I understand that the only way that Eisenhower could get them to the peace table was tell them, if you didn't come, we're going to drop the big one on you now. I don't know if that's true or not. But to me, Korea is like going into the World Series and not having Maddox and Glavine pitching for the Braves. Your hands are tied behind your back. And that's no way to fight a war. If you point a gun at a guy, you should shoot him. Otherwise, don't do it. Right. And that's the way I feel about it. I don't know, but that's it.
What did you think of Vietnam? Did you have similar views?
Yes, I had similar views on that. I think that to be personal with Jane Fonda, I think her actions were disgraceful. I'm probably a lot more mature and I'm not as vehement, but I never thought. I remember I went taking one daughter of mine down to St. Francis Nursing School. She was applying to be a nurse. And she was in for an interview, and this black guy was there. He was a master sergeant, and he was over in Vietnam. And we got talking. Of course, you just talking where you're from, what outfit were you with, so on and so forth. And he's telling me the experiences over there of going down to these villages, and these kids come up and shooting at him, and then you shoot them. You had to shoot to save your life, and then to being vilified for it. And he was very, very disturbed about it. I don't blame him. My oldest daughter, she made. I call her the squirrel, but she's a typical '60s kid, so she might have a different attitude.
When you say she's the typical '60s kid,
well, even today, she's. I don't know. She's probably the smartest one of all of them as far as her IQ is concerned. But
she was anti-war in the '60s.
Well, she wasn't old enough to be really involved in that. But the dress and philosophy, and she still goes to these what she calls them concerts. Where was she the other night? Last night, I guess it was. She went down to what the hell's the guy? Robert was in New York.
Robert Plant.
Plant, yeah, Plant, yeah, that's a guy. I wouldn't, I don't know what to be. When you get past Glenn Miller, I'm in trouble.
Which actually, now that you mentioned Glenn Miller, did you see any USO shows when you were?
Yes, we saw. We didn't get the quality of U.S. shows that they did in England, but we saw U.S. shows, and the guys were giving their all, giving their best. And we had them in the States. I can remember climbing up a telegraph pole, watching Tommy Dorsey out in, I don't know, South Dakota or someplace. And, you know, we did see U.S. shows. They were enjoyable, even though the talent was probably the best. But you know, over there, we probably weren't the best either. But.
When did you join VFW and the American Legion? Did you join right away?
No. I guess it was a few years after I got out. I'm not a member now.
Oh, so you haven't?
No, I didn't continue. No, I'm not a joiner really. I'm probably an oddball in that respect. I don't have, you know, many organizations to be formalized. I don't know whether it's because of being a but I hate anything formalized that you're required. That's why I enjoy retirement so much. I took early retirement, and because, you know, I can get up in the morning and do what the hell I want. I don't have to report here.
Just having said that, I'm just curious because GM. One of the things I've read about GM that it was a very structured, very formal company.
Oh yeah, very structured, very formal. Well, God, when we started out collecting a menial job in the corporation, we all had to wear suits and ties and hats, and boy, it was almost a dress code. And the old man would check you out if you didn't have the hat and you didn't like it. He'd tell you about it. So it was very formalized, structured in those days, and it became less so as time progressed. They used to say that they had so many fannies to fit the seat if a guy died. You know, it didn't turn out that they were as smart as they thought they were. I mean, they had to do an awful lot of reorganization to get back on their feet. But GMAC always made money, regardless of the corporation. We always made money because they became less structured and more lenient, and allowed us to finance other than GM products.
It's being part of your corporation. You think your end of GM dashed more quickly than the rest of GM?
In some respects, yeah. In other respects, no. As far as going modern with computers, we were late in that. But as far as expanding and trying to get business, they had a rule at one time. If you went in to see a dealer, we used to train dealers in selling stuff and things, and a representative from the corporation was in the office, you were not allowed to go in with him because of the consent decree that was signed in the 30s when the Justice Department went after GM, Ford, and Chrysler. They all had their own finance companies in those days. And Ford and Chrysler signed a diversified and sold out. One was commercial credit, and the universal CIT was the other. But GM fought them, and they became a consent decree. When this was one of the stipulations from the consent decree, and we were not supposed to fraternize with the corporation in the presence of a dealer, because that would be coercion, and that was prohibited by the consent decree. But now, hell, that's all I have to win. I think it started with the advent of Reagan. I mean, what was he,
81.
81. Probably if you'll notice now, you have dual advertising, a lot of advertising. GMAC advertise your leasing with the ads for Chevy or whatever it was. But in those days, that was strictly taboo. In my day.
Did it surprise you how bad? I mean, GM in particular took a lot of hits in the 70s and even into the 80s. Did that surprise you, being on the inside and then retiring?
Yeah, it was somewhat of a surprise. Then you became used to it after a while. But as I said, it didn't affect us as much as it did to the other members that worked for the corporation.
Yeah, the corporation.
Because we expanded. We financed real estate. We financed 747s, coal apparatuses. So we diversified.
Did you have a hand in any of that diversification? Yeah. What did you end up? What were some of the things you financed that you probably never expected to?
Well, we financed what the hell do you call it? Well, some of them were airplanes. I financed airplanes. I never expected that. I financed boats which they do now regularly. And another was I know it's an apparatus where they transport coal from the mine into the hoppers. It was a big, huge thing. We did that. But those things, if anyone had told me that when I started that we would be into that, I would say, yeah, you're full of soup. But it got so that you had to look for those avenues to make yourself profitable. And then you had because the automobile business was up and down. You have a lot of dealers belly up. That was a problem. I mean, when they convert cars and you don't pay for it, it runs into millions of dollars.
Well, there would be in Long Island, after you retired, there would be a big scandal, in fact, of
John McNamara.
Yeah.
You know John? He's a good friend of mine.
I read articles about it.
Oh, that son of a bitch, excuse the expression, it was like King Midas. He touched that desk and it turned it over. He used to ship, I'll bet you he shipped 5,000 cars a year to Saudi Arabia and over there in the Mideast. And that's where he got with the trucks and the pickups. But we used to, I handled John. I handled his account. I mean, I was very friendly. I played tennis with him, golf with him. But I knew he was a Sharpie. And because Long Island and New York is a different world. I mean, than say rural New Jersey. When you go to New York, a different set of rules apply. When I first was transferred to Long Island, and I got my own branch, one of the dealers came in to me, and he says, "Well, what do you need? You want a broad? I get you broad. I get you this, get you that." I says, "Get the hell out of here." I said, "You're talking to a farm boy. I don't know what we don't do those things like that." And he laughed. He knew that was it. Now I know the guy, my predecessor, used to take him up on that, but that's another story. But anyway, I was brought up to be strict, a little bit more strict than him. But anyway, they have a different set of operations, and you talk to some of the. I had one dealer that every other word was, well, I can't use another thing, but "F you" and like that. And if you didn't talk back to him in kind, he wouldn't respect you. So you adapt yourself in that way. But that's John McNamara. He really was an operator. He's a smart cook. He didn't have to do that, but I think he did that for the excitement at Channel.
Well, I mean, it was really. I mean, it wasn't just a few million. I mean, it was huge.
The president of GMAC was fired at that, and in fact, the manager over there at the time, I trained her. I didn't do a good job, I guess, but anyway, she at one time was my secretary, and then we got into this program where adapting females, affirmative action, whatever you want to call it, and she's a very smart girl, and she got to be branch manager, and she just didn't. I don't know what he probably conned her or something. I don't know what happened. I don't know because I had already been retired.
But you're not surprised that he could pull it off. It sounds like that.
He what he did. I'll tell you what kind of a guy he was. He'd sell all those cars to Saudi Arabia, and he couldn't get the money back in the States without getting nailed. So if you recall the time of the oil, gasoline, fuel problem, I said John was a smart cookie. He went up to Germany, and he converted all his cash that he had in the German bank, and he purchased stoves, wood-burning, coal-burning stoves, freestanding stoves, inserts, and brought them into the country. And he had a big facility out there, and he must have had, in addition to his warehouse, he must have had 10 tractor trailers filled up to the ceiling. And he made a bundle. He made a fortune out of it. He was always looking for angles. And if you recognize John was that kind of a guy, a hell of a nice guy, but he just looked for the angles, and you just had to watch him. That was all. And didn't let him, as long as he knew that you weren't going to let him get away with it, he couldn't con you, get along with him fine.
And it seems like your successor didn't follow that.
Well, evidently, I don't know. From what I understand, it was a pretty intricate program. He set up his own phony dummy corporation in Indiana or Illinois that was supposed to be putting bodies on the thing. And he had those motor homes. He went into that, and he made a lot of money on that. But you just had to dot the I and cross the T with him. And that was it. He turned state's evidence. I don't think he ever went to the pen. I don't know what happened to him.
Yeah, I don't think
because there was some politicians involved out there. I think he turned out state senator, but they closed him up. And we had a lot. Well, that was after I retired, but even prior to that, we had a lot of dealers bellied up. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 of them. One guy. I was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was sitting there, and I got a telephone call. The guy said, "Do you finance XYZ Pontiac?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, you better do an inventory." I says, "Who's this?" "Never mind." He says, "I'm just telling you." We went down there, and there was $1,800,000 worth of cars missing. They were all on the docks in Elizabeth to go to Saudi Arabia. So I went down to see him, and he says, "Well, I got a letter of credit." He brings out his letter of credit. I says, "This goddamn thing is obsolete." I said, "It's bad. It's no good." And he bellied up.
Did you get the cars before they went?
Yeah, we lost a lot of money on that. Of course, I don't know how many thousands of dollars he had to pay bribes to get the cars off the dock. You went legal, but you also had to grease the palms of the longshoremen because the cars get lost or this and that. And it cost us a lot of money, both official and unofficial, but we took a bath on it because those cars were special order. They're oddball cars, and they weren't readily acceptable in the American market. And all the cars that go over there, they have their catalytic converters taken off, adapted over there.
So we lost. Put them back. You have to put the catalytic converter.
Yeah, but you had to do that to sell them because they wouldn't be acceptable. But
yeah,
it's money. It costs you money. So when you figure up the amount that you lost on the note itself, plus all the additional expenses, we lost no money.
So in other words, dealers are really.
Some of them were.
Some of them could really cause you.
Oh yeah, some of them were, and some of them were very honest people. It's just like any other walk of life. You have bastards and everything.
So you had ended up in Long Island. Where else had you managed?
Mostly in Jersey.
Mostly in Jersey. Yeah. And you really found such a sharp contrast between Long Island and Jersey.
Way of doing things. Yeah, and don't forget Long Island. We were about 65, 70 miles out from the city, but still, most of those people are transplanted city people, and they had a New York way of doing business. And every time you turn around, the hands out for $1. And then, you go into the. We were into a meeting in New York. This was when I was in Jersey, and we went out to have lunch. And my friend of mine left the money. He left it. What we thought was an adequate tip. And this waiter yells out, "Hey, you guys, you forgot your change." And Danny says, "Oh, so I did." And he took the money, walked out, and the guy didn't get a nickel. I mean, that's the way you did the business. Smart ass. He thought he was smart. He thought he would embarrass us to dig in for the money. Danny was in New York. Fortunately, Danny was a New Yorker, and he had to deal with it. But it's a different way of life. And then again, you have other people that are just like people here. Well, of course, this is becoming more citified and urbanized.
That it is. I'm pretty much.
I've run out of questions.
You run out of questions.
Okay. I can't. It's been a lot of fun.
I enjoy it. It's been a long time since I talked about some of the things like that. You recall things, and probably you screwed up some of the things. You tell you what proper sequence, but it was fun recalling.
Yeah, well, we also questions that even pop into my head in terms of out of sequence. I like to try to ask questions and.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
I realized they were questions.
You think of some things after the fact, so to speak. And now I'll go over and give my daughter a hard time. My wife is supposed to pick me up later. She was down shopping. As I said before we came here, we got that thing.
Oh yeah, let me.